Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a gunslinger with a silver star and a righteous cause. You're not the Marlborough Man, not a rugged outlaw, and certainly not the hero of some dusty frontier dime novel. No, tonight you're a cowboy, poor, sunburnt and disposable, and you've just signed up for a cattle drive across hundreds of miles of heat, mud, rattlesnakes, and absolute despair. Maybe you thought you'd find freedom out here. What you'll actually find is saddle sores, dysentery, and a horse that hates you. Before you're trampled into prairie paste or die nameless of infected blisters, do me a small favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing which corners of the world are staying up to learn horrifying truths about the past. And if you'd like early access to more bleak little bedtime journeys, like this one, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, you'll find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You were looking for something, not fortune exactly. You were too realistic for that. Not fame either. No one with sense wants to be recognised in a town where everyone spits in the same bucket. But maybe you wanted purpose, maybe just a clean slate. The sort of thing men imagine they'll find in wide open spaces and hard work. What you actually found was a man with tobacco-stained teeth, a pocket full of IOUs, and a suspiciously nonchalant attitude toward death by trampling. His name might have been Jim, or Jed, or just Boss. You never got a last name. That should have been the first warning. He found you outside a saloon you couldn't afford to enter, leaning against a post and trying not to look hungry. You failed. He asked if you could ride. You said yes. He asked if you could shoot. You said sure. He asked if you could count to 20 without taking off your boots. You lied and said absolutely. That was enough. You were hired. There was no paperwork, no signature, not even a handshake, just a squint, a grunt, and the vague promise of $30 a month, assuming you didn't fall off your horse and die before payday. No mention of hazard pay, no discussion of rations. Just, be ready by dawn, we ride east. He didn't say how far. You didn't ask. You were too busy trying to remember when you last ate something that didn't come out of a can or a questionable stranger's pocket. The drive, he said, would take a couple of months. Maybe less if we're lucky. You'd move thousands of cattle across state lines for a man who owned none of them. You'd sleep on the ground, eat whatever cookie scraped off the bottom of the pan, and ride for 12 hours a day, minimum. You'd get paid at the end? Maybe. You'd get hurt, certainly. But it sounded better than starving in a dusty town full of people who had already decided you'd fail at everything. On your first day, you were handed a saddle that looked like it had survived 2 wars and a tornado. The leather was cracked, the stirrups mismatched, and it smelled like something died in it last week. Probably because something had. Along with the saddle came a bedroll, a rope, and a horse named Ugly. That wasn't a joke. That was his actual name. You could see why. Ugly was a sway-backed, fly-bitten animal with a permanent limp and the soul of a bureaucrat, stubborn, joyless, and entirely resistant to instruction. The trail boss said he was spirited. You suspect he meant possessed. Ugly looked at you with the same disdain a man reserves for spoiled milk and tax collectors. He bit you the first time you tried to mount up. Not hard, just enough to let you know who was in charge. It wasn't you. You were not issued a weapon. You were told you could bring your own, assuming it wasn't too rusty to fire and you didn't shoot yourself with it. You didn't have one anyway. You were also not issued boots, gloves, or even a proper hat. These were personal expenses. Apparently, dying of exposure was part of the onboarding process. There was no training, no explanation of duties, no orientation pamphlet. You learned the job by watching the others, boys with hollow eyes and sunburnt skin, men with coughing fits and missing fingers. They didn't talk much except to laugh when someone got thrown off their horse or kicked in the head. You got the sense that most of them had been hired in exactly the same way you had. Cheaply, quickly, and with no intention of being remembered. The rest of the crew looked at you with a mix of pity and relief. Pity because you clearly didn't know what you were in for. Relief because now there was someone newer, greener, and more likely to die first. You were the sacrificial lamb in a very dirty wool coat. That first night, you didn't sleep. The bedroll was lumpy, the ground was cold, and the air was filled with the gentle chorus of farting cows and wheezing men. Your stomach growled, your feet ached, your back was already stiff from a saddle that seemed designed by a sadist with a grudge against spines. You stared at the stars and wondered if it was too late to walk back to town and take up something safer, like boxing grizzly bears. In the morning, you learned rule 1 of cowboying. Everything happens before sunrise. You were expected to be up, dressed and mounted before the sun even thought about rising. No one told you this. You simply woke to the sound of curses, hoofbeats, and the distant clang of a breakfast pot. You scrambled into your boots, got bit by Ugly again, and started your first official day as a cowboy. You weren't ready. You never would be. You tell yourself it'll get easier, that your hands will toughen, that your legs will stop feeling like they've been beaten with iron rods, that maybe you'll learn to sleep with one eye open and your knees curled around a wet saddlebag. But deep down, you know the truth. This isn't the life you wanted. This isn't the adventure you imagined. This is survival. One day, one ride, one mouthful of gritty beans at a time. You're not free. You're not wild. You're just meat in the sun, hoping you live long enough to get paid. And Ugly is still watching you, judging, plotting. You begin to suspect he's the only one who knows how this all ends. You wake up to something between a groan and a boot to the ribs. Maybe it's the trail boss yelling. Maybe it's cookie rattling pans. Maybe it's your own spine protesting the decision to sleep on a rock the size of a dinner plate. Either way, it's not the sun that wakes you. The sun's still hiding, wisely avoiding the whole business. You are not so lucky. It's 4 a.m, or what the cowboys call time to get moving, and what any reasonable person would call deep night. Your bedroll is damp from the dew, your limbs are stiff, and your brain is doing that thing where it pretends this is all a bad dream, until the smell hits you. A pungent blend of sweat, old leather, wet socks and cow dung. A scent so strong, it could be bottled and sold as an anti-romantic cologne. You stretch or try to, but every muscle in your back has declared mutiny. You are 24 years old and already feel like you've been dug out of the earth. The first task of the day is standing up without crying. The second is finding your boots. They're never where you left them. You suspect the dog moves them at night for sport. When you do find them, half frozen, stiff with grime, you slide your feet in and feel yesterday's dampness squelch between your toes. There's no time to dry anything, no time to do anything except mutter curses into the dawn and start preparing for the worst part of your day. Everything. You shuffle to the fire, where Cookie has once again achieved the culinary miracle of burning beans while leaving them lukewarm. Breakfast is a ladle of something vaguely brown, served out of a tin pot that has seen more bullets than the average soldier. You eat it standing, because if you sit back down, you might not get up again. The coffee is black, thick, and somehow both gritty and oily. It tastes like old horseshoes and medicinal regrets, but it's hot and that's enough. You down it in silence, blinking the sleep from your eyes while your guts begin the slow, inevitable process of protest. If you need to relieve yourself, you do so discreetly and quickly. There are no bathrooms out here, no privacy, just scrub grass and judgmental cows. And don't get too ambitious. You only get a few seconds before someone calls you lazy. There's a rhythm to the morning, and if you miss your cue, you'll spend the rest of the day trying to catch up while the others quietly decide your dead weight. Then comes the saddling, a sacred ritual in which you attempt to hoist a 40-pound slab of cracked leather onto a horse that does not want to be saddled. Ugly, as always, resents your existence. He greets you with flattened ears and a strategic fart. The saddle creaks ominously as you lift it. Your arms already trembling from a night of not sleeping. You throw it onto his back, almost, and it slides off, hitting your foot. Ugly snorts. You try again, this time with a grunt and a prayer. It sticks. You cinch it tight, ignoring the way your fingers bleed slightly, where your calluses haven't formed yet. By the time you mount up, your thighs are already screaming. It's been less than a week, and your body has learned exactly how many muscles are required to stay on a horse for 12 hours a day. All of them. Every single one. The saddle sores have started to bloom, red, raw, angry patches of skin where flesh meets friction. Your knees ache. Your lower back is made of sawdust and misplaced dreams. And you haven't even started riding yet. As the first light bleeds over the horizon, you fall into formation with the others. No one speaks. There's nothing to say. The herd groans and shifts, thousands of hooves churning the earth into mud and manure. The air is thick with dust, kicked up by restless cattle, and carried straight into your eyes, your mouth, your lungs. You taste dirt before you taste anything else. You chew it, breathe it, live in it. There's no time for bathing, no real concept of cleanliness. You clean your hands with spit, wipe your face with the same bandana you use to blow your nose, and consider it hygiene. Your hair is greasy, your nails are black, and your armpits have taken on a new life form. Possibly intelligent, definitely hostile. Soap is a luxury no one talks about. Water is for the herd. Personal comfort is not a consideration. Your clothes are soaked with sweat before the sun's even up, and they stay damp all day. You shift in your saddle constantly, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt. There isn't one. The leather rubs your thighs raw, your boots pinch, and the heat bakes you from the inside out. You can't remember the last time you felt dry or warm in a good way. The trail boss rides up and down the line, barking orders. Move this way, ride that flank, keep that steer from wandering into the ravine. You nod, you obey, and you silently curse his existence. He smells like soap and authority. You smell like dead dreams and unwashed denim. He doesn't notice or care. By mid-morning, you've been awake for 6 hours and accomplished nothing except not dying. That's considered success. You drink from your canteen, warm, metallic water that tastes like the inside of a broken pipe. You ration it carefully. No one wants to be the idiot who runs out of water before noon and has to beg from Cookie. Sometimes you fantasize about quitting, just riding off into the scrub, finding a cool stream, maybe starting a quiet life as a hermit. But then you remember you're miles from anywhere, on a horse with no loyalty, carrying no food, no map, and barely $1 to your name. So you keep riding, because even hell has a schedule. This is your morning. Every morning. Until the drive ends, or you do. There is no elegant way to describe herding cattle. It is not majestic. It is not cinematic. It is not the noble domain of the free man on horseback, silhouetted by a setting sun. It's chaos. Hot, loud, mobile chaos. It's the full-time job of making sure thousands of half-ton animals don't kill themselves, each other, or you, in that order of likelihood. And they're trying, constantly. The herd moves like a single dumb creature with 2,000 legs and no clear direction. You ride alongside it, sweating through your shirt before breakfast has even finished souring in your gut. You shout to steer the animals, shout to other cowboys, shout just to hear yourself over the stamp and squelch of hooves in mud. None of it works. The cows do what they want, and what they want is often suicidal. Some veer off into ditches, some spook at birds and try to sprint into the brush, dragging others with them in a bovine panic spiral. Some just stop. They stand in the middle of the trail, snorting and blinking like they've forgotten what movement is, until someone whips them back into the stampede and they rejoin the herd as if nothing happened. One cow stares at you all morning like it's planning something. You don't know what, but you know it's not good. You ride flank, which means your job is to keep the cattle from spilling out sideways, like a burst sack of grain. You yell, wave your arms, crack your rope, and occasionally kick your horse into a half-hearted charge to push them back into place. Ugly is no help. He's slower than the cows and twice as grumpy, but he's steady. And that's all that matters when a few £1,000 of confused meat starts drifting toward a cliff. The dust is the worst part, or the heat, or the smell. It's hard to rank them. The dust is constant, kicked up by hooves, carried by wind, and funneled directly into your eyes, ears, and lungs. It coats your teeth until they feel like gravel. It settles in your nose and turns your snot to mud. You stop coughing after a few hours, not because you've gotten used to it, just because your body has given up. Then there's the heat. It starts mid-morning and doesn't let up until the sun goes down in a blaze of mockery. There's no shade, no relief, just the pounding of sun on your hat, your back, your already sunburned neck. The sweat pours out of you and vanishes just as fast, leaving behind a crust of salt and the vague memory of hydration. You drink from your canteen, but it's warm as bath water and smells like whatever was stored in it before it became yours. And the smell, God help you, the smell. Thousands of cows relieving themselves in a slow, mobile wave of manure. Some of them have digestive systems that appear to run on fear and spite. The air reeks of dung, sour sweat, rotting grass, and something you don't want to identify. You gag more than once, but quietly. No one wants to be the one who throws up on their saddle horn. You're not alone out here, of course. The other cowboys are nearby, some riding point at the front, others riding drag at the back. The true punishment detail. The drag riders live in a cloud of cow farts and kicked up filth, and by the end of the day, they look like they've crawled out of a soot factory. You thank God you're not on drag duty, until you remember you were yesterday, and probably will be tomorrow. Occasionally, you come across a river. The herd hates rivers. They see a gentle current, and immediately assume it's an ambush. You spend hours getting them across, shouting until your throat bleeds, waving branches, cracking ropes, and watching them either freeze in place or launch themselves into the water like hairy, panicked cannonballs. One cow floats downstream for a terrifying minute before dragging itself back to shore, coughing like a Victorian orphan. Some don't make it. The weak ones, the sick, the injured, the just plain unlucky, collapse in the sun and don't get back up. Sometimes the trail boss makes you put a bullet in them. Sometimes he just says, leave them. Either way, the vultures follow. You don't think about it. If you do, you'll realise how easily you could end up on the same menu. Time on the trail stretches. Minutes feel like hours. Days blend together into a haze of dust, sweat, and the constant lowing of cattle. You lose track of how long you've been riding. Your thighs are numb, your back is crooked, and your hands are permanently curled into rope-holding claws. At some point, you stop thinking of the cows as animals. They're just problems, walking, farting, occasionally charging problems. And you, what are you? A glorified babysitter, a mobile fence post. You're not the rugged individual of Western legend. You're a meat escort, keeping the product alive long enough to turn a profit. None of the cows are yours. None of the land is yours. You are here because someone richer needs someone poorer to do the work that breaks the body and empties the soul. But still you ride. Because if you don't, the cattle scatter, the herd fails, and the trail boss finds someone else desperate enough to take your place. You keep the beef moving, no matter how blistered your skin, how concussed from a wayward horn, or how sunbaked your thoughts become. You ride until your bones feel hollow and your mind goes quiet. Sometimes you look out across the horizon, endless scrubland, buzzing flies, 100 pairs of vacant cow eyes, and you wonder what would happen if you just kept going, if you veered off course and vanished into the hills. But you don't, because even freedom out here looks like starvation. So you ride, Because that's the job. Because someone has to do it. Because you said yes, and now the cows know your name. Your first real introduction to Cookie came the day you made the mistake of asking what was for supper. He gave you a look, not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from decades of cooking for people who would eat their own boots if you salted them enough. Then he handed you a dented tin plate with a steaming pile of something grey on it and said, "Meat." You didn't ask what kind. You never would again. Cookie isn't his real name. No one knows what it is. He doesn't offer and no one asks. He's somewhere between 60 and immortal, with a beard that could conceal a full deck of cards and eyes that have seen too much and stopped caring years ago. His hat is older than most of the cowboys. His apron is a crime scene, and he prepares every meal with the same knife. A long rusty thing he sharpens with a whetstone and wipes on his pants. That knife has sliced bacon, chopped beans, trimmed calluses, removed a splinter from someone's foot, and once doubled as a dental tool. No one talks about that last one, but everyone remembers. Breakfast is served before dawn. It usually consists of blackened biscuits, burnt on the bottom, raw in the middle, and a scoop of beans that taste like smoke, ash, and whatever wandered into the pot last night. Sometimes there's bacon, but it's more rind than meat, more bone than chew. You choke it down because it's food, technically, and you need calories to spend 12 hours in the saddle. You try not to chew too hard on anything. You've seen teeth snap doing that. The coffee comes in a blackened pot the size of a child's coffin. It never leaves the fire. Cookie just adds more grounds and water until it thickens to the consistency of tar and takes on a flavour best described as metallic regret. You drink it anyway, because without it your brain doesn't work, and you're already one step away from mistaking a cactus for a cow. It's full of grounds, tastes like it was strained through an old sock, and sometimes leaves a ring of something unidentifiable at the bottom of your cup. You don't question it. You need the caffeine more than you need answers. Lunch is a theory. It exists more as an idea than a meal. If you're lucky, Cookie tosses you a strip of jerky so dry it could double as roofing material, or a square of hardtack that looks like chalk and breaks with the crunch of old bones. You suck on it, gnaw it, soften it with spit, anything to avoid breaking your last molar. Some cowboys soak hardtack in coffee or stew to make it edible. Others just curse and chew through the pain. You've seen a man use his boot heel to crack it open. You've also seen a man give up and eat grass. That man didn't last long. Dinner is where Cookie gets creative. The pot is big, the fire is hot, and the ingredients are ambiguous. Sometimes it's stew, sometimes it's slop, sometimes it's just a question mark, with steam rising off it. Meat, when it appears, is never explained. It might be beef, it might be rabbit, it might be something that died nearby. Once you found a feather, once a bone that didn't belong to anything you recognised. You stopped looking after that. Everything is oversalted or undersalted, never in between. Sometimes you find whole peppercorns, probably dumped in by mistake. Sometimes you find a nail. One night you found half a horseshoe in your bowl. Cookie just said, "Adds iron," and moved on. You swallowed your food in silence, hoping it wasn't symbolic. The water is always warm. You carry it in your canteen, refilled from whatever creek or rain barrel the chuck wagon can reach. Sometimes it's yellow. Sometimes it's green. Once it had something wiggling in it. Cookie told you to just boil it first. You tried, it didn't help. Boiled filth is still filth. You drink it anyway, because dehydration hits faster than dysentery. Not by much, but enough to make the risk worth it. There are no vegetables, none. Not unless you count the occasional shriveled onion, or a single potato that's more sprout than starch. You dream of tomatoes, of corn, of anything with colour that didn't once moo. Cookie once handed you a slice of something orange and rubbery and called it cheese. You bit into it and realised it was just lard that had been dyed in the sun. That night, you dreamed of lettuce like a starving orphan, dreams of cake. The chuck wagon itself is a marvel of inconvenience. Every pot is soot black, every knife is sticky, and nothing is ever truly clean. Cookie washes his hands in the same bucket used for scrubbing pans, rinsing socks and watering the dog. That dog, by the way, is the only creature allowed to lick the ladle. Sometimes it licks the coffee pot too. Cookie says it builds immunity. There is no silverware. You eat with your hands, your knife, or whatever stick you can whittle into something vaguely spoon-shaped. Plates are optional. Most cowboys just eat from their hats, bowls, or the lid of the nearest pan. You wipe it clean with your sleeve and move on. Sanitation is a memory from another life. Every meal is loud. Cows low in the distance. Men grunt and cough and spit into the fire. Cookie hums tunelessly as he stirs the pot. Someone always complains, but never loud enough for him to hear. You all know better. The last man who insulted Cookie's cooking got his stew served cold, and with a handful of dirt stirred in for seasoning. Cookie called it earthy. The man apologised. The rest of you took notes. After dinner, you sit by the fire and try to remember what real food tasted like. A fresh apple, a slice of bread not made from flour that's halfway to weevil, a cup of water without a skin on it. You close your eyes and imagine a kitchen, a clean fork, a tablecloth. It feels like fiction. Then Cookie clangs the pot and tells you breakfast is at 4, and you remember where you are. You scrape the last of the grit from your tin, rinse it with a splash of brown water, and stuff it back in your pack. You burp and it tastes like boiled fat and wood smoke. You are not nourished. You are not full. You are, however, alive. And out here, that's more than enough. Before long, you smell like something that crawled out of a smokehouse and died behind it. Not just sweaty, not just unwashed, spoiled. Like bacon left out in the sun, wrapped in a shirt that hasn't been removed, or even meaningfully shifted since the drive began. Every inch of you is coated in grime. Dust, cow filth, grease, and the thick, sour varnish of your own sweat. You try not to think about it. You'd get used to the stench if it weren't coming from you. Your thighs are the first thing to go, not dramatically, just slowly, cruelly, like they're being shaved down with sandpaper every time you shift in the saddle. At first it's just chafing, a bit of warmth, a twinge when you move. Then comes the sting, then the weeping sores, then finally the patches of skin that rub clean off, leaving nothing but a slick red mess beneath your trousers. You walk like someone who's been attacked by hornets. You sit like someone who regrets every decision that led to this job. No one mentions it. They just nod, hand you a jar of something vaguely medicinal, and wish you luck. Your saddle, allegedly designed for riding, feels more like a punishment issued by the Spanish Inquisition. It creaks with every step and pinches you in places you didn't know had nerves. The leather is stiff, the padding non-existent, and no amount of shifting seems to make it better. You try using your bedroll for extra cushion. It shifts and bunches. You try standing in the stirrups for a few miles. Your knees rebel. Eventually, you just accept it. Pain is part of the process. The saddle doesn't care how you feel. It's there to hold your bones in place while you rot on the inside. Your boots, once too stiff to bend, are now soggy ovens. Every morning, you put them on damp. By midday, they're soaked in sweat. By evening, they've been baking in the sun for so long, they've taken on a smell you can only describe as foot jerky. You peel them off at night with a grimace and hope nothing inside has gone green. Your socks, if you have any left, are useless. Frayed, thin, and coated in salt, they do nothing to protect your heels from blistering. You've started cutting strips from your undershirt to use as padding. It doesn't help much, but it makes you feel like you're trying. Your shirt is another matter entirely. Once cotton, now armour, it has fused to your back with layers of sweat, grime, and dried blood from bug bites and saddle abrasions. Taking it off feels like peeling away skin. You stop trying. You leave it on. It's part of you now. Like your hat, which you've worn so long, your hair underneath, has turned into something brittle and sentient. You don't remember the last time you washed anything. If it rains, you lift your arms and pretend that counts. The insects are relentless. Mosquitoes, flies, ticks, they don't just bite, they settle. They set up camp on your neck, your wrists, the soft parts of your face you can't shield. You start every morning by slapping your skin and end every night covered in welts. Your hands are a constellation of scabs and bites. Your neck looks like it's breaking out in hives. The others say it'll get better. Your blood will get too thick, too sour, and the bugs will move on. You're not sure if that's hope or a warning. Blisters rise wherever your body rubs or folds, between your fingers from gripping the reins, under your arms where sweat pools and never dries, behind your knees where the fabric digs in with every motion. They start as hot spots, become bubbles, then pop, leaving behind raw, wet skin that sticks to everything and screams when touched. You bandage them with whatever scraps you can find. Bits of saddlecloth, torn socks, even newspaper. It's not sanitary, but it's that or infection. Rashes bloom across your body like wildflowers. If wildflowers were itchy, inflamed, and oozed a faint yellow pus. They show up around your waistband, in the crooks of your elbows, behind your ears. Anything that stays moist too long becomes a breeding ground. Cookie offers you a jar of something thick and foul-smelling. Tells you it's good for the skin. It burns going on. You don't know if it's helping or just punishing you into distraction. Either way, you keep using it. Then there's the sunburn. Out here, there's no shade. The sun doesn't just warm you, it scalds. Your neck and face are red after the first day. By the second, they're peeling. By the third, they've cracked and blistered. Your lips split when you talk. Your nose flakes off in sheets. You smear grease, spit, and anything vaguely oily onto your skin in an attempt to block the rays. Nothing works. The sun finds you. The sun always finds you. You begin to smell yourself even before others do. It comes in waves. When the wind shifts, when you lean over, when your shirt rides up just enough to release a waft of something ancient and deeply wrong. It's the smell of open wounds and baked sweat, of leather and rot. No one says anything. Everyone stinks, but the silence is its own kind of warning. You've entered a new stage of decay. At night, you sleep curled in your filth, too exhausted to care. The bugs nibble at your ankles, your sores stick to your bedroll. Your nose is too clogged to register how awful your body has become. You dream of baths, of fresh air, of cool water that doesn't smell like cow. But when you wake, it's the same. The ache, the sting, the creeping sensation that your skin is beginning to separate from the rest of you. You are not getting stronger. You are not hardening into a man of the West. You are fermenting, a human brisket, slow roasting, in denim and desperation. The others see it in your eyes. They've been there. They know. And they know it only gets worse. You were told the hardest part of cowboying was the cattle. That was a lie. The cattle are only the loudest problem, the most visible. The real threat, the thing that waits just outside your firelight, is everything else. The land itself wants you gone. The animals, the weather, the very air. They're not obstacles, they're predators. And you? You're meat with a rope and a sunburn. It starts small, a scorpion in your boot, a spider the size of a biscuit crawling across your bedroll in the middle of the night. You learn to shake everything, boots, hat, underwear, before you touch it. Even then surprises happen. One morning you find a snake curled under your saddle blanket, sunning itself like it pays rent. Another time, a tarantula perches on your saddle horn like it's considering taking your job. You let it. You walk for 3 hours until it leaves. It was, objectively, more qualified. Coyotes howl at night, distant but deliberate. You don't see them, but you hear them circling, yipping at the edge of camp like a pack of bored hyenas. Sometimes they get bold and come in close, looking for scraps or weak calves. You see their eyes in the dark, glinting just beyond the firelight. Your horse shifts nervously. You tell yourself they won't attack. You don't quite believe it. The ground itself isn't much safer. There are holes that swallow hooves, rocks that snap ankles, cacti that stab through leather like it's tissue. You've pulled so many thorns out of your shins, you could build a fence from them. And the insects, the ones that don't just bite but seem to bite with intention, find you no matter how tightly you wrap yourself. They sneak into your blanket, your ears, your food. One morning you wake up with a beetle in your mouth. You don't tell anyone. You just spit and move on. Then there's the weather. A sunny day can cook your brain like an egg. A windy day can blow enough dust into your eyes to make you cry blood. But it's the storms that really make you understand how fragile you are. You can smell them before you see them. That electric sharpness in the air. The sudden silence of birds. The way even the cattle go still. And then it hits. Wind like a slap. Sky cracked open. Rain so thick it feels like drowning upright. Thunder spooks the herd. Lightning turns it into panic. 2,000 cows hear a boom and decide, together, to sprint. You don't get a warning. You get a wall of hooves. Stampede. There's no bravery in a stampede, no heroics. There's just blind panic and instinct. You hear it before you see it. The rumble, the rising roar, the thunder that's not thunder. Then you feel it in your chest, in your ribs, in your teeth. The ground shakes. Your horse panics. So do you. You scream something. Orders, prayers, nonsense. No one hears. No one cares. The cattle are already moving, and when they move, they don't stop. You turn your horse and ride hard, trying to flank the herd, trying to steer it, trying not to die. Your hat flies off. Your reins slip in your hands. Your knees scream as your body smacks into the saddle over and over again. One steer breaks from the pack and heads straight for you. Ugly veers, nearly unseating you. Your foot catches in the stirrup and you dangle for a moment, flailing like a badly made puppet. You right yourself, barely, heart pounding hard enough to rupture something internal. The steer misses you by inches. The rest follow. When the dust settles, the cattle are miles ahead and several cowboys are missing. One shows up an hour later, limping and furious. One never shows up at all. You don't ask what happened to him. No one does. There's no body, no funeral. Just an extra tin plate that Cookie quietly removes from the wagon. Surviving a stampede doesn't make you feel lucky. It makes you feel fragile, small, like a matchstick in a flood. You start watching the sky with a new kind of fear. You flinch at thunder. You sleep light, ears tuned to the shifting noises of the herd. Every groan, every shuffle, every startled snort makes your stomach clench. Once is enough to teach you how little stands between you and obliteration. You think that's the worst of it. It's not. One afternoon, while riding drag, you dismount to check a calf that looks sick. You step into the grass and feel something sharp, fast and wrong sink into your ankle. You look down. Snake, rattler. It disappears into the brush before you even finish swearing. The bite burns immediately. A hot, pulsing pain that spreads like fire up your leg. Your vision goes blurry. Your mouth goes dry. You call for help, but it comes out like a croak. Another cowboy sees you stumble and rides over. He takes one look at your ankle, goes pale, and yells for Cookie. There's no doctor on the trail, just old remedies and older hope. They cut open the wound, suck the venom, spit into the dirt. Cookie ties off your leg with a filthy rag and pours a slug of whiskey down your throat. It doesn't help. You spend the next 2 days strapped to the side of the wagon, sweating through your clothes, your body a battlefield between the venom and your will to live. You survive. Barely. Your leg swells. Your fever spikes. You lose time. When it finally breaks, you're weak, starving, and unable to stand without wobbling. The trail boss gives you 1 day to recover before you're expected back on your horse. No thanks, no sympathy. Just the unspoken rule. If you can't ride, you can't stay. You mount up, legs still aching, and ride back to the flank. Ugly doesn't care that you almost died. The cattle don't care. The coyotes certainly don't. Nature tried to kill you and failed. But it'll try again tomorrow. and the next day, and the day after that. Out here, the world doesn't hate you. It's worse than that. It doesn't even notice you exist. When the sun finally sinks and the air cools just enough to stop baking the marrow inside your bones, you'd think it might be time to rest. The cattle have settled. The dust has stopped churning. The men are curling up in their blankets or passing around the last drops of watered-down whiskey. But your work isn't over. It's just changed shifts. Because tonight, it's your turn to take night watch. Night watch means exactly what it sounds like. You watch, all night. Specifically, you watch a few thousand unpredictable bovine nightmares, trying not to spook at wind, shadows, or their own flatulence. You climb back on your horse, wrap yourself in your crusted-up coat, and begin the long, slow circle around the herd. You're not meant to stop them if they bolt. You couldn't. You're just supposed to notice when it happens, yell about it, and hope someone else is still awake enough to help clean up the mess. The sky's clear, but the stars are cruel. Too bright, too quiet, too distant. They look like tiny eyes staring down at you with mild disdain, like celestial judges watching you rot in the dust. You hum under your breath to keep yourself from falling asleep. Something slow and stupid. A lullaby meant more for your nerves than for the cows. Some cowboys sing actual songs. Others talk to the herd like they're lovers or old friends. You settle for muttering to steer 843, who seems the least likely to break into a blind panic if startled. He blinks at you once and resumes chewing something that might be grass or might be a stick. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters, really. Your horse is no more enthusiastic than you are. Ugly plods in slow, deliberate steps, head low, tail flicking lazily at the occasional fly. You whisper to him too, not sweet things but low, bitter complaints, half-coherent thoughts, the sort of things you can't say in daylight without getting laughed off the trail. He doesn't answer, of course, but he listens. Or maybe he's just too tired to protest. Sleep presses at the corners of your mind like a fog. Your eyes sting. Your head droops. You jerk awake every few minutes, heart pounding, convinced you've dozed off for hours and missed some catastrophe. You haven't. Time moves slower during night watch, not because less is happening, but because your brain starts to slide sideways. Reality becomes less reliable. You see shapes that aren't there, hear sounds that don't belong to cattle or coyotes. You squint into the dark and swear you saw someone walking, just for a second, on the other side of the herd. You know it's nothing, but it doesn't feel like nothing. The herd shifts occasionally, a grunt here, a lowing call there. Most of them are lying down now, great lumpy silhouettes sprawled in the dust, steam rising faintly from their backs as their bodies cool. You count them obsessively, not to track individual animals. You gave up on that weeks ago, but just to stay awake. Counting gives your mind something to gnaw on. 1, 2, 10, 30. You start over. It doesn't help, but nothing else does either. The wind is the worst. It moans across the plains, dragging with it every regret you've ever had. It seeps into your coat, your bones, your teeth. It makes the grass hiss and the trees creak and the hairs on your neck rise. When it gusts, the cattle snort and shuffle, nervous. You hum louder, hoping the sound soothes them. It doesn't. One steer stands up, then lies back down. Another kicks in its sleep. You grip the reins tighter and scan the dark, looking for movement that means something, and dreading that it might. You start to think about home, not because it was good, and it probably wasn't, but because it was at least something solid. Something with walls, something with a bed, maybe even a door that locked. Out here, there's nothing between you and the dark except a horse, a rope, and the hope that tonight won't be the night a thunderclap turns everything into a stampede again. You try not to think about the last time that happened. The hooves, the screaming, the man who never came back. You don't cry exactly, but your face gets hot and your throat gets tight, and for a minute you can't breathe quite right. You wipe your eyes and blame the wind. No one's around to see you anyway. Just the cows, the sky, and Ugly, who glances back once and then looks away, like he's embarrassed for you. Eventually, another rider approaches from the far edge of the herd. Your relief. You nod at each other in silence, trading positions with the kind of wordless efficiency that comes from mutual suffering. You guide Ugly back toward camp, spine aching, legs numb, mind running on fumes. You dismount slowly, every joint stiff, every muscle sore. You don't even bother untying your boots before collapsing into your bedroll. You're too tired to sleep, but you close your eyes anyway and hope your body gives up before your thoughts do. As you lie there, half aware, you hear the cattle shifting again. A distant moo, a rustle of hooves. You don't get up. It's not your turn anymore. Let someone else sing lullabies to steer number 843. Let someone else whisper into the void. For now, you are done. You're tired, you're dirty, you're haunted, and morning is only a few hours away. You ride through another day. Same dust, same heat, same mutinous cattle. By the time the sun dips low again and the herd slows to a lazy trudge, your legs feel hollow, and your brain like it's been wrung out like a dishcloth. You dismount with a grunt and try not to think about how many days it's been. No one's counting anymore. Evening comes with the usual routines. Sore backs hunched around a low fire, smoke curling into already burned eyes, and Cookie stirring something that smells like punishment. This is when the cowboys start to unravel a bit. Not all at once, just in small familiar ways. They stretch out their legs, take off their hats, and become human again. Sort of. The movies always show cowboys as hardened men of mystery, lone riders with sharp eyes and clean shirts, saying little and meaning even less. In reality, your fellow cowhands are mostly teenage boys with cracked lips and bad teeth. A few are old men who never made it out of the saddle. Most are somewhere in between, though it's hard to tell exact ages under the grime. What they all share is a look, not of wisdom, not of toughness, but of slow creeping resignation. The look of people who know they'll die one day on the job, and that no one will write a ballad about it. By nightfall, they're too tired to pretend. Everyone staggers toward the campfire, groaning as they unroll blankets and stretch sore limbs. The fire gives just enough warmth to sting your cracked knuckles, and just enough light to remind you how filthy everyone really is. Shirts are stained, socks are threadbare, faces are shadowed with stubble and sunburn. You all smell like beef and old rope. Personal space no longer exists, neither does shame. The conversation around the fire is about what you'd expect from men who haven't bathed in weeks and have been breathing cow farts since sunrise. Someone always starts a farting contest. It isn't funny, but it's predictable, and at this point predictability is a kind of comfort. After that, there might be a round of ghost stories. Nothing good, just recycled tales about haunted mines, dead riders, or cursed cattle. The older hands scoff, the younger ones pretend not to flinch. You mostly stare into the fire, too tired to participate, too wary not to listen. Sometimes a fight breaks out, not over anything important, usually a stolen swig of whiskey or a misplaced plug of chewing tobacco. These fights are short, clumsy, and mostly pitiful. Two exhausted men flailing in the dirt until one of them lands a lucky punch or someone else intervenes. No one wins, no one gets punished. Cookie just grumbles and throws another log on the fire. If you're lucky, someone pulls out a harmonica and plays a few sad, wheezy notes. The sound drifts over the herd like a dying animal, trying to remember a tune. A few men hum along, a couple cough. One might mutter that he used to play better before his lungs filled with dust and regret. No one laughs. There's no irony left out here. Conversation, when it does happen, is scattered. Some talk about women, real or imagined. Some talk about land they want to buy. Some talk about places they've been, though half of it sounds made up. You hear stories about shootouts that never happened, gold strikes that never paid out. jobs that ended in mysterious disappearances. No one bothers to fact-check. The lies are more comforting than the truth. Now and then someone gets quiet and confesses something real. A brother they left behind. A child they've never met. A crime they may or may not have committed. The fire makes it easier to say things you wouldn't say in daylight, as if the flames will carry the words away. No one responds, no one judges. You all have something you don't talk about. You start to learn who to avoid. The man who laughs too loudly at nothing. The one who polishes his knife a little too often. The one who talks in his sleep, not in words, but in growls. You keep your bedroll on the edge of camp when you can, just far enough to sleep light but close enough not to raise suspicion. You don't want to be noticed too much. Being noticed is rarely good. And then there are the silences, the moments when someone is missing and no one brings it up. Maybe they fell off their horse. Maybe they wandered off drunk and never came back. Maybe they just had enough. You don't ask. No one does. The unspoken rule is clear. If they didn't say goodbye, they weren't meant to. Cookie quietly puts their plate back in the wagon. Their name, if anyone knew it, vanishes by morning. The fire crackles, the men mutter, and you start to feel the weight of something deeper than exhaustion, a kind of shared erasure. None of you really matter out here. Not as people. You're workers, temporary, disposable. You don't get monuments. You get rope burns and bone-deep blisters, and maybe a grave marked with a rock if someone has the time. You stare into the flames, letting your mind drift. You think about what brought you here. Not the reasons you told the trail boss, but the real ones. The things you ran from. The things you lost. The things you couldn't fix. Out here, no one asks questions, and that's a kind of mercy. But it's also a kind of burial. The longer you ride, the more the man you were starts to fade. One of the boys, a kid with 2 large boots and a scar running from his jaw to his ear, sits down beside you and offers a scrap of jerky. You take it without a word. He doesn't speak either. You both chew in silence, eyes fixed on the fire. In that moment, you understand each other perfectly. As the night deepens, the conversation dies. One by one, the men slump into their bedrolls, some snoring instantly, others staring at the sky like they're waiting for a sign that isn't coming. You stay by the fire a little longer, the heat making your eyes sting, the silence humming, like a second heartbeat. The harmonica player lets out one last sour note, then gives up and curls beneath a moth-eaten blanket. You lie down eventually, not because you're ready to sleep, but because there's nothing else to do. Around you, the men settle into the kind of exhausted silence that only comes after too much dust, too much riding, and too many things unsaid. You close your eyes, you'll be up again before long. No one mentions the ones who didn't make it. You're starting to understand why, not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters too much. There is no doctor on the trail, no nurse, no medicine beyond superstition and desperation. If you get sick, there's no office to visit, no bed to lie in, no clean white sheets or stethoscope-wielding figure to reassure you that everything will be fine. There is only the chuck wagon's half-empty bottle of rock gut whiskey, a heated knife for when things swell or rot or fester, and the quiet, grim acceptance that some things won't heal. Out here, if your body betrays you, that's between you and the dirt. It starts with something small, a cough that doesn't go away, a sore that refuses to scab, a stomach that cramps more than it should after Cookie's latest stew. You convince yourself it'll pass, that it's just fatigue, just bad beans, just the result of breathing in too much cow shit and sleeping too close to someone who hasn't changed socks in a month. But then you wake in the night, shaking, sweating, and trying not to scream as your gut twists itself into knots. You stagger from your bedroll and try to find a private patch of earth, far enough from camp to save some dignity, but close enough that you can still crawl back if you collapse. You don't make it far. You fall to your knees behind a bush and void yourself so violently it feels like your soul is trying to escape through your bowels. You gasp and dry heave until your ribs ache. You pray, not because you believe, but because you need something to scream at. Someone brings you water. It's warm, metallic, and tastes faintly of mud, but you drink it anyway. Someone else hands you the bottle, not for celebration, just for numbing. The whiskey burns all the way down, scorching your throat and leaving you dizzier than you already were. You thank them, or maybe just grunt. Then you roll over and hope sleep takes you before the next wave hits. The trail doesn't stop for illness. The cattle keep moving, and so must you, whether on foot, on horseback, or dragged in a stupor beside the wagon. If you're lucky, Cookie lets you lie in the back with the flour sacks and rattling pans. If you're not, you ride, wobbling in your saddle, pale as bone, clutching your gut like it might fall out if you let go. The others glance at you with the polite discomfort reserved for men who are clearly dying but haven't yet done the favour of finishing it. No one wants to get too close. Disease spreads fast out here. There's no soap, no sterilisation, and no understanding of what causes what. Theories fly around the campfire. Some say it's the bad water. Others blame swamp air, demons, or just plain bad luck. One man insists it's Cookie's beans. No one argues, but no one stops eating them either. Hunger trumps hygiene. Eventually, your fever breaks. Or it doesn't. If it does, you wake drenched in sweat, barely able to move, but alive. If it doesn't, you stop waking altogether. Cookie and two others dig a shallow trench off the trail. They don't mark it. They don't say a prayer. There's no time for ceremony. You're one of many. Another name forgotten. Another body buried under hard-packed dirt and silence. Even if you survive, you're not the same afterward. The sickness lingers. You're weaker, slower. Every cough sounds like a warning. Every stomach cramp feels like the start of something new. You lose weight you couldn't afford to lose. Your belt notches tighter. Your boots feel looser. Your reflection, if you ever catch a glimpse in a pool of water, is more bone than face. And dysentery is just the beginning. There are worse things. There's tetanus, for one. A single rusted nail, a jagged wire fence, a poorly aimed hoof. That's all it takes. Your muscles lock up. Your jaw clenches. You twitch and seize and bite through your own tongue. No one knows what to do except pour whiskey down your throat and hope it numbs the worst of it. If you're lucky, it passes. If not, they bury you before you go completely stiff. Then there's blood poisoning, infections that start with a blister and end with your veins turning black. Cookie might try lancing it with a hot knife. He might smear it with lard and herbs. Someone might offer a prayer. Nothing helps. You rot from the inside out. It doesn't take long. The others learn to stop watching. It makes it easier when they have to roll you into a blanket and find a place far enough from the herd that you won't spook the cattle. Sometimes the sickness doesn't even have a name. Men waste away slowly, coughing through the night, their skin turning strange colours. Some bleed from the gums, some go blind. One man started shaking and never stopped until his heart did. No one knew what it was. No one asked. They just burned his blanket and avoided the spot where he slept. The fear of disease settles in the camp like smoke. You see it in the way men edge away from anyone who coughs too hard or limps too noticeably. You feel it when you wake up sweating and wonder if it's just the heat or the start of something final. No one says it aloud, but every man on this drive knows that nature isn't the only thing that might kill you. Your own body might beat it to the punch. There's no healing out here, only endurance, only chance. If your body holds out long enough to reach the next town, maybe you'll find a doctor there. Maybe he'll know more than Cookie and his bone-handled knife. But maybe not. And even if he does, you'll probably be too broke to pay him. The drive doesn't come with health insurance, just grit, rot, and an early grave with a bad view. So you learn to live with it. The aches, the coughs, the slow unravelling of a body worked too hard and fed too poorly. You drink the water, you eat the stew, and you hope your gut doesn't mutiny again before nightfall. And if it does, well, Cookie knows how to dig. After weeks of dirt, disease and cow breath, the outline of a town on the horizon feels almost holy. Roofs, walls, people who aren't covered in manure. It's the first sign that the outside world still exists, or at least some dilapidated, whiskey-soaked facsimile of it. The cattle are delivered, counted, penned, and handed off to men in waistcoats and boots that don't smell like despair. You don't even ask what they're worth. You already know the answer won't affect your pay. The trail boss takes his cut. The ranch will take theirs. You get what's left, a few crumpled bills and some jangling coins, handed to you like a consolation prize for not dying. It's barely enough to buy a decent pair of gloves, but it burns a hole in your pocket all the same. Civilization, however brief and unsanitary, is calling. And so you go. The town itself isn't much. A collection of wooden buildings hunched together against the wind, smelling faintly of old beer, cheap perfume, and open sewage. The streets are packed with mud, piss, and the occasional passed-out mule. You step off your horse like a man walking onto holy ground, knees buckling, spine creaking, every joint wondering if this is what retirement feels like. It isn't. But for a few hours you pretend. You make your way to the saloon, or maybe it's the brothel. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The doors swing open, and you're hit with a wave of warmth, smoke and noise. Laughter that's a little too loud. Music that's a little too off-key. A piano with half its keys missing, and a bartender who looks like he's been through 3 divorces and 1 fire. You slap your money down like you've got something to prove and order the strongest drink they've got. What you get is something amber, watery, and probably cut with kerosene. You drink it anyway, and then another after that. By your 4th drink, you've remembered how to smile. Not because you're happy, but because you're not in the saddle, and your stomach isn't trying to kill you. You get a shave and a haircut from a man who doesn't ask your name and charges extra if you bleed. You consider buying a bath, but by the time you remember where the bathhouse is, you've spent half your wages on booze and $2 on a woman who seemed willing to pretend, for exactly 6 minutes, that you weren't just another sunburnt ghost passing through. She doesn't talk much, neither do you. She smells like stale rose water and looks 10 years older than you when the makeup comes off. You thank her anyway. Not because it was good if it wasn't, but because you needed something that wasn't a cow. Afterward, you stagger back into the street, dazed, dishevelled, and somehow still thirsty. Someone bumps into you. Words are exchanged. You don't remember what they were. The next thing you know, fists are flying. Yours, theirs, someone else's. It's all a blur of blood and broken chairs. You're not even sure who won. You wake up in an alley with a black eye, a missing boot, and the vague sense that one of your molars has quietly resigned from your mouth. You drag yourself to the livery stable to check on Ugly, who's chewing straw and looking far more put together than you. He snorts once like he's judging your life choices and turns his back on you. Fair enough. The next morning, or possibly afternoon, you gather what's left of your dignity and your gear. Your head is pounding. Your stomach is still making threats. You try to piece together where you went wrong, but there are too many variables. You came into town with just enough hope to waste. Now you leave with less than you started. You pass by the general store, thinking maybe you'll grab something practical. A fresh shirt, a better knife, some bandages. Then you check your pockets and remember you spent most of your earnings on a warm bottle of regret and a woman who didn't even bother to ask your name. You settle for a tin of chewing tobacco and a length of rope. Both will probably come in handy. As you saddle up to leave, you watch a newer hand, bright-eyed, clean-shaven, trying to act like he belongs, swagger toward the saloon with a full purse and a wide grin. You don't say anything. He'll figure it out on his own. Or he won't. Either way, it's not your problem. You ride out of town with a mouthful of stale whiskey and a head full of dull silence. The trail calls again, not because you love it, but because there's nowhere else left to go. The towns are never as good as you want them to be. The drinks never numb enough. The women never care enough. And you're never paid enough to matter. You don't feel rested. You don't feel ready. You just feel tired. Tired in your bones, in your blood, in whatever part of you still believes there's an end to this that doesn't involve a shallow grave and a wrong name on a ledger. But you ride anyway. Because out here, civilization is just a fever dream. A loud, sticky place where your money disappears faster than your dignity. The real world waits back on the trail, behind a herd of stupid cattle and a sky that never blinks. There are no clean slaters, no second chances, no saviours waiting in dusty hotels. There's just the next ride. Years from now, someone will write a story about men like you. They'll call you noble. They'll call you strong. They'll say you tamed the wilderness with a 6-shooter and a stare. There will be paintings of men on horseback, backlit by sunsets, chins lifted, hats tipped low over thoughtful brows. They'll turn your rot into romance, your starvation into self-reliance. They'll wrap the stink of you in clean denim and good lighting and sell it as freedom. They'll forget the things you couldn't. The hunger that ate your stomach lining before breakfast. The heat that cooked you inside your shirt. The nights spent whispering lullabies to animals so they didn't stampede and turn your body into pudding. The weeks of blisters, of coughing up blood, of wondering whether the lump in your boot was a broken toe or just something trying to hatch. They won't mention the men who fell off their horses and were left behind because the herd couldn't wait. They won't describe the look on the trail boss's face when he calculated the cost of digging a grave against the time it would take. They won't paint the shallow pits in the dust or the way Cookie quietly scraped names off the supply list without ceremony. They'll never write about how many of you cried. Maybe not loud, maybe not often, but in the dark on night watch, when the stars looked too cold and the wind sounded too much like everything you tried to forget. They'll never show the saddle sores that turned raw flesh into open wounds, or the way you screamed when you had to ride anyway, or how you learned to ride differently, not to avoid the pain, but to move around it. They'll say you were brave, but you weren't. You were tired, you were broke, you were sick and sunburnt and stuck, and you kept going because there wasn't a better option, not because you thought it meant anything. The trail didn't build character, it sanded it down. It turned you into something leaner, meaner, less prone to hope, and more willing to settle. That's not bravery, that's erosion. They'll say you were free. That's the big one. That's the lie that sells. They'll talk about the open sky and the endless land and the idea that you were unshackled, untamed. But you weren't. You were just broke and expendable and too far from town to say no. You followed cattle that weren't yours, on land that wasn't yours, for money that barely lasted a week. You answered to a trail boss, who answered to a rancher, who never even learned your name. That's not freedom. That's subcontracted misery. Your name won't be remembered. Maybe it never mattered in the first place. You'll be folded into the myth like sugar into bitter coffee, melted down, sweetened, unrecognizable. You'll become every cowboy in every story. A composite, a silhouette, just enough grit to make the fantasy believable. They'll give you a cleaner face, a straighter spine, a purpose you never had. You'll be someone worth admiring because they'll strip away everything that made you real. There will be songs about you, poems too. Boys in school will read about your adventures and think they sound grand. They'll wear wide-brimmed hats and point fingers like pistols. They won't know that the closest you ever came to a real shootout was watching 2 cowhands slap each other with empty bottles before throwing up in unison behind the saloon. But it doesn't matter. The lie is cleaner than the truth. They won't talk about the cold, or the lice, or the moment you realised your saddle blanket had fused to a festering wound and had to be peeled off like old wallpaper. They won't talk about the way you itched, or the way you bled, or the time you buried a man with your bare hands because the shovel broke halfway through. There's no song for that. They'll make statues. They'll name teams and trucks and barbecue sauces after you, and none of it will be for you. It will be for the people who need to believe that someone like you was out there, choosing this life because it was noble, not because it was the only door that hadn't shut in your face yet. But maybe that's all right. Maybe it's better that way, because you're not there to argue. You're not there to correct them. You're somewhere out on the plains, buried in a trench that washed away 3 winters ago. Or maybe you died in town, coughing blood into a handkerchief no one wanted to touch. Maybe you just disappeared, another worn-out husk headed west, until the land swallowed you whole. You are not a hero. You are not brave. You are not free. You were never meant to be remembered. But someone will profit from your legend, just not you. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. If you're still awake, thank you for riding the long, bitter miles, for eating the dust, nursing the sores, and bearing witness to a life that was never as free or fearless as the stories claim. If you'd like early access to more of these slow, grim histories, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to help keep this little corner of quiet storytelling going, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with other overlooked lives you'd like to see brought back into the dim light. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chronicler, Andrew S. Sleep well.